Welcome to the podcast where relationships, confidence, and determination all converge into an amazing, heartfelt experience. This is Speaking from the Heart.
Welcome back to a very spooky episode 164 of Speaking from the Heart. Now, if you're not sure why I think it's a little bit spooky, you're going to find out today, because today's guest is Rebecca Williamson. And no, she's not spooky, but what she represents might be a little spooky in itself. Rebecca owns a haunted wedding venue. She talks about the history of the farm, ghosts, and the challenges of starting a business with people telling you how to do it who don't actually own a business. Rebecca went from a mail carrier to business owner in a very unconventional business that had a big learning experience. And you're going to find that today's story, especially with how she got into this house that she owns, which is a very beautiful place, which we'll talk about, really helps to understand why sometimes, even in our own houses, trying to be able to build that value, build that consistency, build our future might be tougher than it might appear, especially from the surface. Now, I've had other guests on the show that have talked about not only their adventures when it comes to owning an Airbnb, maybe even traveling through a variety of different areas of their lives to get to where they are today. But I think you're going to find that this story has some twists and turns, not only of opportunity, but also invest in something that might be scary starting out, but actually might help us in the bigger scheme of things, being able to learn, being able to shift in the priorities and direction of our own lives. I think you're going to hear from Rebecca's story that purpose, where we find those opportunities, means that we're not always granted tomorrow. So we should take advantage of today in order to not only find those ways in which we can make inroads, but even if it's scary in itself, spooky that is, you're going to learn so much about how it's not as spooky as it sounds. But with that, let's go to the episode. All right, we're here with Rebecca Williamson. Rebecca, thanks for sharing your heart with us today.
Well, thanks for having me on. I'm excited to be here.
I love what we're going to be talking about today, but first off, happy Halloween to all those that are listening to this episode, because I think today's guest will give you a little bit of perspective of why I had this episode air on the date it is airing on. So thanks so much for spending some time with me. I already let the audience know a little bit about your story and what you are all about, but I gotta ask this question. Why would you buy a historical house to rent out and have all these kinds of activities? There has to be a backstory, and maybe you can start from the beginning with us.
Yeah. So there is a lot of backstory to Cambre. So the Cambre House itself was built in 1867 by French immigrants who came to the United States to be part of this perfect utopian society called the Icarians. The Icarians were kind of like a hippie commune where you sold everything you owned, you donated it all to this society and lived in this apartment-like complex. The Cambres came over from France to be part of this idealistic movement. And then they ended up branching out on their own and bought the farm that I now own in 1860. And 4 generations of Cambres lived there. They had an apple orchard there, so it was a working apple orchard until around the 1940s. And then in 1979, the family ended up selling the home at auction. And my grandmother had come there as a little girl to pick apples, and she had some really fond memories of being out at that farm. And so she told my grandfather she really wanted to buy it. And so she drug him out there and said, "We're buying this." And he fell in love with it too. And so they bought it. Not with the intention of ever living out there, but because they loved history and antiques. And my grandmother always said it was exactly the way she remembered it when she was a little girl. And there's very few places you can say that about. The Cambre family built the home really well, and they actually took very good care of it. They never remodeled the home at all. And when you're there at the house, you can tell that this home is almost exactly the way it was built in 1867. So my grandparents bought it with the intention of preserving the history. They filled it with antiques and treated it kind of like a life-size dollhouse. And then we did craft shows, we did weddings. If there was a big family gathering, we were doing it out at the farm. In 2015, my grandmother passed away. And then 2 weeks later, my husband passed away suddenly. And
Oh, wow.
yeah,
I didn't realize that. So I'm so sorry.
yeah, it was very sudden for my husband. My grandmother, she'd had some problems for a while and she had a stroke. And so her passing was slower. And then after she passed 2 weeks later, my husband just literally dropped dead. And so the Cambre House was their favorite place. My grandmother loved it and my husband loved it as well. He loved spending time out there and being there. And so, in the most of all that grieving, where I didn't really know which way was up, they were getting ready to sell the farm. And we had a real estate person come in and they told us that anybody who bought this property would have to completely gut it and remodel it if they planned on living in it. And having this historic home that all the windows are even the original windows from 1860s. The idea of that being gutted and remodeled was heartbreaking. I'd already lost so much at that point that I just couldn't bear the idea of losing yet another thing. And so I bought the farm. No clear plan in mind. Anybody who has been in what is called complicated grieving. So when you're grieving more than one person or more than one large loss at a time, you end up in this space that's called complicated grieving, which is complicated. You lose a big sense of who you are as a person when you go through that much grief. And there's a lot of physical manifestations to grieving that you don't really realize until you're in that space. And thinking clearly is not something that is a possibility. But yeah, like I said, it was one of those things where I just said, I'm not going to lose one more thing. And so I bought the farm, which trying to explain to your friends that you've bought this 3-bedroom farmhouse in the middle of nowhere over an hour from your house that you don't ever plan on living in is kind of rough. So,
I mean, I kind of had that thought, like this wild proposition that maybe you were doing this for noble motives, but then hearing this, I almost felt like this was like a triple whammy of sorts that if you would have bought the house and you would have not been able to fix it, that just would have been another grieving moment for you, perhaps.
yeah. Yeah, it would have been another grieving moment. Like the idea of losing one more thing was just something I just couldn't handle. I literally couldn't stomach the idea of losing one more thing. And I bought it. And it was just one of those things. I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing with it. So then I bought it and then said, oh my, what on earth did I just buy? What am I going to do with this? I have no clue. So I kind of went back and I said, okay, well, what did my grandparents do with this? So they did craft shows. And then I'd had a few cousins that got married over the years out there. And so I had the bright idea that I could open it up as a wedding venue. Now, I was a mail carrier at this point. I was not a business owner. I didn't know anything about business. But I'm like, we've had some weddings. This will be easy. I'll just tell people we're doing weddings out here and they'll just show up because people like outdoor weddings right now. It's a big thing. And oddly enough, you do actually have to advertise.
Yeah, usually that's how it works. And I've learned that the hard way for my business too, so I can understand.
I mean, you come into it with these ideas like, oh, yeah, slap out the sign and people will know and they'll show up. And that's just not how that works. And so I was able to work with small business development. It's a free program through the government. And they were able to kind of help me learn how to run a business, learn how to market myself. This is a farmhouse out in the middle of nowhere. No one will drive by this place ever unless they're looking for it. And sometimes they drive by anyway. So the marketing aspect of it was super important. And I was grateful for the help for the small business development where they came along and were able to kind of give me a crash course in owning a business.
I've been looking at photos on your website. For my listeners, I'll have them in the episode notes too, that you can take a look at this house. It's beautiful. And I see the work that you've done with it. I really am afraid to ask you this, and maybe you remember it, but I'm kind of cringing a bit. You said that a lot of work had to be done. How much did it cost to actually renovate the overall house to make it a functional facility?
Not as much as you'd really think. My grandparents had done a lot of work themselves when they purchased it from the Cambries. And like I said, it was really well preserved. A lot of it was just going through and cleaning, a lot of cleaning. My grandparents had been in the nursing home for the last 6 years of their life. So it hadn't really been used in 6 years. There was a new furnace involved. So I took out some really old carpet in one room and laid down some new floor. I was really hoping to salvage the floor underneath of it, but when we pulled up that really nasty old carpet, there was plywood that had been nailed down like an inch apart, like into the entire floor, like little 1 inch squares. And it was crazy. So
Yeah.
unfortunately, I couldn't save the floor underneath, but I found like a floating floor that's put over the top that a lot of people think looks like the original floor. So I was able to match that up. One building had to come down. The foundation was kind of giving out on this old barn. And so we took that down and put in a patio. But as far as old houses in the middle of nowhere, we got really lucky in that there wasn't a whole lot of extra stuff.
Now, I noticed that this is overlooking the Mississippi River. So, to put this in perspective for our listeners as to where this is exactly located, can you kind of give us an idea if you can draw that map visually for us?
Sure. So I am in West Central Illinois. If you picture the shape of Illinois, there's a nose kind of on the side, and I am right on the nose of Illinois on the Mississippi River.
It has to be actually pretty beautiful to be at the house, being able to also see that overlook and then being able to use it for a variety of different things. So you started to say some of that already where you converted this into a wedding facility, but I see that on your website you have rentals and ghost tours. So I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about what you offer in terms of general rentals and then what's appealing to going to this house to then do a ghost tour.
And now we see why I'm on the Halloween episode.
Yeah, I'm like getting super scared about it. Ooh. Okay, that was my visual effects for my listeners.
Yeah, so I own a haunted wedding venue. Everybody always asks me, like, okay, how did you realize the farm was haunted? And my answer to that question is I spent the night there for the first time. So when we were
Mm.
kids, we spent a ton of time out at the farm, but we didn't actually spend the night because my grandparents lived about 10 minutes away from the house. And when it got dark, we all just went home or we went to grandma and granddad's to spend the night. We didn't stay out there. So I bought the home and we're getting ready to do some work. So we went out there for the weekend. And that particular weekend, I brought my sister and my daughter with me. My daughter was 8. And as the sun goes down, it becomes apparent that we're really going to spend the night there. And my daughter panics. So my 8-year-old is freaking out. She's like, I am not sleeping here. And I'm like, yeah, you are. And she's like, I don't think so. You are going to take me home. And I said, absolutely not. And so I had the car keys and she can't drive. So she is actually staying here at this house and she refused to sleep in any bedroom. I mean, that was a flat, hard no. She was not going to sleep in any of those bedrooms. And we finally compromised in the fact that she was going to sleep in the living room. We brought an air mattress with us. So I am sleeping in the middle of the living room on a twin size air mattress with an 8-year-old glued to my side who is terrified to be in this house. Now, my sister slept upstairs in a bedroom. She'd brought her puppy with her. And the puppy was like 6 weeks old and was still going outside to go to the bathroom in the middle of the night. And so in order to do that, she comes down the stairs, walks right beside my head, goes out the front door, comes back in. So in the middle of the night, I'm waking up 3 times by somebody coming down the stairs, walking past me and going out the door. I did not open my eyes because I don't want to get the puppy excited. I finally got that kid asleep. We're not going to make waves here, right? And so the next morning, I told my sister, your puppy did really good. You guys only went outside 3 times last night. And she says, puppy did great. We went outside twice last night. And he said, no, you didn't. You went outside 3 times. And she says, no.
Oh.
We argued and finally came to the realization that I really had heard somebody come down the steps that was not my sister and go out the front door. And so that kind of got us thinking about stuff that had happened at the farm. My grandparents never thought the farm was haunted. That wasn't something that we had actually talked about. But during the 80s, that wasn't really a thing people did talk about. But the basement door of the house opened so often when we were kids. If there was a big event out there, a lot of times they made one of us grandkids stand by that door to make sure it was stayed shut. The attic door opened on its own a lot as well. They always blamed one of us grandkids, but none of us grandkids ever remember opening that door. And that door actually coming back and looking at it as an adult, that door is weighted so it swings shut. So if you push it open, it will swing shut. So there literally is no reason that that door should ever be opened on its own. And so now we're thinking, I think we might have something going on here. And I had a friend who was starting a paranormal investigative team at that point. And so I reached out to him and I said, hey, I just bought this farmhouse in the middle of nowhere. Do you want to come and check it out? And he did. And that was the point where we realized that the home was haunted. We definitely had a lot of activity. We were able to measure some really solid cold spots about that time. If you've done paranormal investigating, there's a lot of equipment they bring and the lights went off and they got a lot of activity. And so then it was like, oh, I own a haunted farmhouse.
Mm.
I had a friend suggest that I should start doing ghost tours out there. And I did. And it went really, really well. I will say hosting ghost tours is terrifying because you can't tell the ghost it's time. You can't have practice runs with people you don't see.
It's like they paid money. Now it's time to come out. No,
I know.
it doesn't come out that way.
And don't get me wrong, I have walked in the house before a paranormal investigation and kind of clapped my hands and said, okay, guys, this is it. Don't make me look stupid. But yeah, the ghost tours went really well so far. I had really good luck getting activity for people. I host my own private ghost tours. It's a 2-hour tour where I have a paranormal team there. They bring their equipment. I tell them the history of the location and the farm, and then they get to go investigate with a paranormal team using their equipment. So it's a lot of fun. It's like you see on the TV shows. And then I rent it out to paranormal teams who are looking for overnights at locations. And so the first year, I didn't have a wedding at my wedding venue.
I didn't have my first client for a while until like about halfway through the year. So I totally understand where you're coming from. It takes a lot of persistence. Yeah.
It does. And like weddings are planned at least a year out. So it takes at least a year to really build up a wedding venue, if not longer. I think I finally hit my stride with the weddings about 3 years into it, but the ghosts really kept my farm going. And for me, having the ghosts there and doing ghost tours and stuff, especially coming through all that grieving process, was hugely affirming. My grandparents did some interaction on some of the tours where they were able to tell me that they liked what I was doing out of the farm. That was something I was like, since I hadn't planned on buying the farm, I hadn't been able to discuss that with them. And to do this ghost tour where granddad was like, yeah, I really like what you're doing and I'm happy about it. That was like really nice to be able to get that feedback, you know?
I actually thought of this, and this is probably a little far-fetched of a question, probably one of the far-fetched questions I've ever asked on the show. But I want to put this in your mind, and maybe you thought of this already.
Okay.
Do you think that maybe your husband and even your grandmother, obviously they're no longer here, do you think that those are the spirits that might be haunting the house?
My husband, not as much. We have never really had any interaction with my husband at the farm, which is like kind of disappointing. But I mean, he moved on to wherever he wanted to go, I suppose. My grandmother occasionally is there. Usually before we're getting ready for a big event or something, we'll smell like this cinnamon smell, which when they were having the craft shows out there, she filled the house with these cinnamon broomsticks and stuff. So it had a really strong cinnamon smell, which the last craft show they had was in 1993. So that scent is obviously no longer really associated out there. But yeah, before I've had my big craft shows out there, I will get a little hint of that cinnamon scent. And I feel like she's there, like she's excited that we're doing this. My grandparents love this farm so much. And my husband did too. My husband really enjoyed spending time out there. And so to be able to do this out there and be able to talk about them is so nice, to be able to have that opportunity to share their stories and carry on this legacy of what they loved.
That's actually something I was thinking about is what's the legacy that you want to leave with this house? Obviously, it has been registered with the National Registrar, so
Mhm.
that is a historical place that can't be essentially touched in ways in which that could be ruinous for that place. But I'm wondering for you, what was your vision when you took over outside of all the things that you shared already? What do you think ultimately you want to achieve by having this space for other people to come?
Like I said, originally there was no plan in mind.
Yeah.
Unlike other business owners who had worked for years and years to make a plan, I had no plan. I just had the farm. But like,
Yeah.
as far as legacy goes, I really,
I'm going to add on to my question. And I know that you said that earlier too, because I figured that this was sort of sudden. This sort of opportunity kind of just sat on your lap and it was here. But even then, you had this opportunity now and you've been doing it for a number of years. I'm sure that you have felt into what you wanted to see as the future for this
yeah.
place. So that's sort of where I was also thinking when I asked that question too.
I think what I really like about what I'm doing right now is like taking my special place, something that was very special to me and my family, and making it a special place for other people and their families as well. So for the wedding couples, this becomes their special place. This is where they got married, and they'll come back and do pictures with their kids and things like that. And so having it become special to them too is usually rewarding. And then, like, for the paranormal people, they fall in love with the house too. And like, I have paranormal teams that will come out here and investigate, looking for ghosts every single year because they love being out there so much. So, that part, I like to think my special place will live on and be special for other people too. And I have succession plans. Like when you go through a sudden loss, like I did with my husband, you start thinking long term, like what happens after I go. So I have all of that planned out. There's two options for that. One option is my kids take over, and they're still kind of like, maybe, I'm not really sure, but maybe. So if they choose not to, then I can set this up as a nonprofit and have a board that runs the farm.
It sounds like there's always going to be a farm and a place to go and watch the Mississippi River.
That's my plan.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that. For you, and I find this connection really unique. Here you were a postmaster essentially, delivering mail. You probably were delivering the businesses, and now you get the mail delivered at this house as being a business owner. So you kind of did this 180 in your own career.
Right.
First off, I don't think anybody imagines that journeys in life could ultimately end into places that you never thought possible. And I'm sure that even for yourself, you never thought in a million years, like, I'm going to be
Yeah.
an innkeeper of sorts. You're kind of a events coordinator. You're a jack of all trades when it comes to just event management and having pretty much a facility that can be rented out for a variety of purposes. What has it meant for you to grow from being that past version of yourself to who you are today? What has that journey been for you, and what has that meant and represented?
Yeah. If you would have told me that I was going to be doing this, I would have said, I don't think so. That sounds
Yeah.
pretty wild. But I really felt like this gave me purpose. So they tell you when you go through grieving that you lose a sense of self. Your sense of self really gets lost, and you have to try and rebuild and re-find yourself again. And starting the business at the farm really gave me purpose. It gave me goals and plans and gave me something to look forward to and work towards. It was just this project that really took on a life of its own and gave me back that sense of purpose and self that I'd really lost going through grief.
Do you think that the grieving process is still going on, or do you feel that it's just part of you and not just what is motivating you to keep doing better for all your customers, all the people that rent? What does that look like for you to kind of work through that?
I think it's just a part of myself now. That is something that happened to me. It was very defining for me. And I know a lot of people say, well, I'm past all that now or whatever, but it's not something I'm ever going to really get past, but it's something I've learned to live with. I've learned to live with that as a part of myself. And I mean, I will always miss them, obviously. I think as kids, we expect our grandparents to pass away. And so that loss was one that I had been mentally preparing for myself from when I was a kid. But when the actual day comes, you're just never ready. Even when you're expecting it and prepared for it, you're just never really ready. But then losing my husband very suddenly, like that was something that we obviously not had planned on. And it makes you think about life differently. It makes you think about how much more fragile life is. I mean, we all are born with this feeling like we're invincible and, oh, we'll live to like 120 or something. But the reality is that you just don't know and you're not guaranteed tomorrow. And you have to learn to really embrace living today. So I think that to me, it kind of gave me that sense of purpose to go through all of this.
For you, being that you've gave this house, the Cambre House, a future for tomorrow, what has that meant for you? I mean, obviously, you've had some time now to think about it over the years, and I'm sure you've come to a different conclusion than what you ultimately had set out in the beginning, because it was sort of, like I said earlier, it dropped on your lap. What do you think it has meant to be able to have part of history revitalized?
I love the history side of it. I love being able to take the history of the farm and be able to share that. I love being able to tell my grandparents' story and the Cambre family story and even my story to people and be able to share that. I think originally, like I said, I thought, okay, well, I guess we're going to have a wedding venue and I'll do all this wedding stuff. And now it's almost about half and half. I do ghosts and I do weddings. And for a long time there, I ran it as two separate businesses entirely. Okay, on one hand, we're going to put on the wedding hat and we're going to talk about weddings. Then over here, we're going to put on the ghost hat and we're going to talk about ghosts. And still learning the business process, I went through a business coaching program where they're like, okay, you need to bring these two together and
Yep.
put one hat on it. And I went through and I rebranded everything as the haunted wedding venue. So that was kind of my bringing the two sides together. And now here we are, haunted weddings.
I have to say, you're one of the more unique individuals to be able to bring something like those two concepts together, because I always heard them separately. And here, even in Pennsylvania, we have haunted houses, we have wedding venues, but nothing quite like combining the two together. So I find your business venture very unique. Congratulations on everything that you're doing to make that such a success and getting as many people, many different ideas out of it. I've been super excited for you, just seeing this and hearing you today. Just all these things that you're doing is incredible, Rebecca. I want to give you the last few minutes here as we're at the end of our time. Let us know how we can get in touch with you. Maybe people want to come visit the Cambre House. Maybe you can give us some information as to how they can make a reservation. Maybe for the future, they might want to come and do a ghost tour. Although it's Halloween, I might missing out a little bit, but hey, I'm sure you're doing that year round, and that's an opportunity for them as well. So I'm going to give you the last few minutes to share all of that with our listeners.
Yeah. So my website is cambrehouse.com. So CAMBRE, Cambre House. I'm on Facebook at Cambre House. I'm on Instagram at Cambre_House. And then I'm on TikTok too at Cambre House. At this point, if you type Cambre House into a search engine, I should pop up somewhere. If you look on YouTube, there's a lot of videos of people doing investigations out at the house. So if you like all the ghosty stuff and you want to see what a good investigation at Cambre looks like, you can definitely check some of those out.
think that all of that is amazing and spooky in itself. So I'm going to put all of that in the episode notes for you and also for our listeners to access. But I have to tell you, it is an incredible story of grief and turning it into profoundness and opportunity. And I love how you're creating this opportunity for so many other people instead of letting it get the best of you. And I think that is really important in this day and age to even take a big step back and reflect. And I could see this farm being a great revenue opportunity for not only the emotional revenue that we need to have, but also what we can generate in our minds as exciting opportunities. And you've done that. You've continued to do that, Rebecca. And for all those reasons and to celebrate those successes, thanks for being on Speaking from the Heart, sharing with us about all these opportunities. And I wish you further success in the farm. I love the haunted aspect of it and having this venue for so many different people. So thanks again for being part of the show.
Yeah. Thanks for having me on, and happy Halloween.
Again, I want to thank Rebecca so much for being part of the show, talking about the Cambre House and sharing a little bit about her own journey getting to where she is today. But I have to say, being able to run your own house, being able to run the opportunities in which you have guests coming in and out, whether they are scary, whether they are something that falls into your lap, whether that is a family tradition that you're carrying on, is something that is an experience that we should never, ever take for granted. Even if everything seems like it's going to be torn down, including our own house, this is the opportunity that you can rebuild in whatever direction you want. And Rebecca really did that, not only in her life, but also with this opportunity that was granted to her. Whether you're going through physical, emotional grieving, you can build a place where there's many opportunities to start from scratch and make it whatever you want, especially in this setting, a place where people go to escape, be able to have retreats, weddings, whatever the venture might be, and be able to explore something about themselves that they might have otherwise never had a chance to do. I think that this story really exemplifies that we need to salvage part of the processes, part of the things that go on in our life, even if they seem a little bit scary, and repurpose it in a completely different direction. Lately, I've been thinking about this, especially when it comes to the variety of different avenues, opportunities that I have in my life, even with all the things that happen in my business, Your Speaking Voice. But I think that we have to learn from these experiences that even when we are growing, it is okay to shift in different perspectives. It is okay to go in a different direction. It doesn't mean that you have to test the values of your family. Whatever has happened in the past can be set in stone and you can't change it. That's not really the case. You can do whatever you want as long as you're respecting the fact that it's being passed down to carry on not only that tradition, which can be used very loosely, but more so about what the experience can be to one another. That's really how culture begins. Being able to hand down the lessons from generation to generation of the things, of the places, of the opportunities that others get to explore. And I think that even when we hear about the feelings, when we are shifting in our own lives, we often forget about the lessons of our past. Sometimes we're thinking that fear, those things that hold us back from really exploring what is out there, means that we don't want to do what is really the hard work. Rebecca didn't have to fix this house. She didn't have to salvage it for what it is today. But even then, when you think about all the weighted doors, all the different hinges that have to be hung, all the photos, all the experiences that people get to have just because you're customizing it based on the experiences that you can show, farmhouses are a great way to explore those kinds of opportunities, not only for ghosts, but also for yourself. Now, we have to really preface this a bit. I know that for many people, ghost hunting, that superstition, that paranormal activity might not be for everybody. You might be calling bluff on all those things, especially at your age. And that's okay. There are other people that actually do genuinely believe in it and make not only a living off of it, but have also given some opportunity to reconsider the energy, the spirits that are around us that help us to feel or act on certain things that go and come around. I think those doors, those things that are oftentimes hard to push and try to open, mean that we have to also explore the tools that might be even right around us. Maybe that door that we're supposed to go through isn't ready for us quite yet, and that's okay. What we really need to learn from experiences such as Rebecca's is that we might be doing something in one direction, but we can certainly shift it to go a completely different way, and that's okay too. It means that we're exploring ourselves. We're exploring what the opportunity is to venture outside of those four walls that we're often entrapped in. Whether that is a cubicle, whether that is your own work from home setting, whether that is the manufacturing floor, whether it's something else that you are trying to escape, just know that being able to take a place at the seat at the table so that you can start to figure out what that direction is in your life means that you are oftentimes challenging what might be in front of you and not wanting to be part of that process anymore. You want to break down that weighted door. You want to be able to go into a place of your life that you can explore. But to be able to take a place for something else, to give somebody else that space so that they can do something that they might have been dreaming for a very long time, such as a retreat, such as a wedding, such as escape from the overall stresses of life. That might be the greatest succession opportunity that could ever fall in your lap. It is a matter of finding what that purpose is. It's a matter of keeping your nose to the grindstone to be able to find ways that for yourself and for others, you can keep carrying that torch forward. That, my friends, can be very hard, even if you're possessed by spirits that are around you that oftentimes don't have your best interests in mind. Finding your purpose means having places like this farmhouse that Rebecca has described today, converting it into something that now serves a whole different kind of purpose. A retreat of a retreat, if you will, of being able to find plans, looking forward towards things that you might be going through, but you need some time away from others. But even if you're not quite ready, even after this experience, that's what this is exactly all about. Living this kind of experience. You see, we're not always guaranteed tomorrow. Tomorrow is never granted to us automatically. We might not ever wake up from our internal slumber, just like zombies and mummies you might think about around this time of year, especially with Halloween. It might even portray something of a completely different nature that you didn't really think was going to happen. You didn't really believe that this sort of feeling, this thought process, this experience that you are ultimately having right now in your life would ever come to fruition in the first place. You see, with feeling like you can't always get tomorrow, you have to live each day with your truest purpose, which is why breaking down those weighted doors, figuring out what it means to tear down that house into making it something that's completely different for suiting the needs for your new house, whatever that might be, figuratively or literally. It means that you have to salvage some of the things that have happened in your life, always looking back, thinking about what it means to keep pressing forward, to keep seeing what that end goal is, that even when all the things that happen in your life happen for a reason, you stay true to the fact that you're never granted tomorrow. During this time of year, it's always so hard, especially with the loss of loved ones, especially if you've been experiencing that. And even in the United States, going through some of the toughest things that you might have ever seen in this country's history. You have to think, what is it that we can latch onto? What is it that gives us hope? It helps us experience dreams, aspirations, to keep working towards that prize that we're ultimately trying to obtain. Does it mean that running a house, giving opportunities to others, be able to really suit the needs? Is it something that you really want to do, but you're not quite sure how to do it financially? Is there something else that you could do even better than what you're doing today? Maybe being able to create those values in your life. Maybe knocking on those doors that are weighted, trying to push open so that you can experience some of the opportunities to explore ghosts, goblins, other sort of spooky things that might be happening in your life, whether that is literally or figuratively. Maybe these ramblings today of some musing that I've had, even with this conversation with Rebecca, shed a light on why it's so important to always do what you always thought you could do. Even if you're told that you can't do it, you have to refuse it. You have to work harder than maybe other people have ever worked to be able to bring that value, to bring that conviction, to bring purpose to otherwise things that people would ever agree that you can't do, but you want to show them that you are able to do it. You are granted tomorrow if you're willing to work on yourself and help others to do the same. It's no different than trying to find purpose in the dreams and aspirations of the job that you live and the things that you want to do that have not yet been accomplished. Even if you go through life struggling on every step of the way, let me ask you a question. Is that struggle helping you to grow, helping you to rebuild, repurpose yourself in what you're ultimately supposed to be doing? But also, if others are not helping to challenge your status quo, to help you see that light at the end of the tunnel, if they're not helping you become the best version of yourself, maybe in a new way, what exactly are you doing hanging around them? To find this place, to make it special for so many other people, to create plans to help look forward towards the other things that you're still learning and growing in, trust me in this. You might be looking not only for those spooky ghosts, those spooky areas of your life in which you can create that value, but just like our guest today, you can find new ways to not only help yourself build that house that you always wanted, whether it's personal, professional, business, or whatever the case might be, you are entitled to it, as long as you believe that you are guaranteed that tomorrow, in more ways than just what ghosts, goblins, mummies, or any other sort of spirit might say to you. You are worthy of so much, as long as you believe in what you can be, becoming that best version of yourself. And that might be the best Halloween costume you ever wore. Thanks for listening to episode number 164 of Speaking from the Heart, and I look forward to hearing from your heart very soon.
Thanks for listening. For more information about our podcast and future shows, search for Speaking from the Heart to subscribe and be notified wherever you listen to your podcasts. Visit us at www.yourspeakingvoice.biz for more information about potential services that can help you create the best version of yourself. See you next time.